All right, episode 42. That's
Is that true?
Episodes. Yes, this is number 42.
Really?
Yeah, so we've got a lot of episodes. I just looked it up right before we started to sound smart, like I've been paying attention. But this is our 42nd and probably most significant episode on Digging
And this
Deeper
is the
ever.
one where we're finally going to give away the free car.
Yes.
It's a special 40-second. I don't know.
I don't know what to say about that. There's no free car, but nonetheless, it's episode 42. Brandon and Pete. Yesterday was Psalm 121, which is where you landed, and dude, it was great. I've been telling a lot of people this is one you need to listen to watch. In many ways, you repackage something that's probably a common encouragement in church, but the way in which you went about it, some of the history, some of the geography, just gave a different spin that seemed to really, maybe I'm just speaking personally, just resonate where I was at. You also started off talking very candidly on the front end, talking about it's kind of where you were at, particularly that, I encourage people to listen and watch, but just, I lift my eyes to the mountains. Where does my help come from? And who are you looking to? And ultimately, are you looking to the Lord for your source of help amongst all the other mountains? And you said this is something that you personally had been working through in your own life to refix your gaze in God's direction more so. And I just wondered if you'd willing to start on the front end to kind of share, more open that window for us. Why was this such a personal message for you yesterday?
Well, man, that's a tough question. Caught me off guard a little bit. When you say,
have you ever been double oohs? I feel like
I'm processing because on the one hand, when you say a personal message, I can look back over the past year or so and identify some of the messages I've given that I felt in my heart like this is very personal. Like I'm speaking from this place of, I don't know that I felt that yesterday. I think what I ended up feeling yesterday was when I finished my message, not preaching, but when I finished writing it, it was almost the opposite. I finished it Friday morning. I was kind of dealing with some sickness this week, so I was kind of late, and I kind of got it done, and I was like, okay, I'm done. And I left church on Friday afternoon. We had our sledding event, and I was actually feeling inside my heart that it wasn't personal enough. Like I had this sense of is this kind of me phoning it in because I'm not feeling well? Is there something here? And I actually, I don't know, I don't want to give this picture of me going into a dark room and kneeling down and praying before the Lord. Just driving in my car, I think I was just like, God, are you even speaking through this, or am I just writing stuff down? And I sat on it a while, and then Saturday morning I came back in and just sort of deleted the first page and said to myself, I don't want to get up and preach if this isn't personal to me. And so I kind of rethought some of that. And really, I would say the end is what was more personal to me. And the end wasn't even in my notes of, it was something Saturday night that actually started resonating, this idea of just thinking about the way that Peter slowly began to sink when he took his eyes off Jesus. And I don't know that I can definitely say the last 2 years, yes. Right now, am I in a lot of turmoil about the world around me? I'm really trying to tune it out. But there's a part of me that kind of feels like, have I slowly been fading in keeping my eyes on Jesus? And then when those things do pop up, are they attacking me more, hitting me harder? And I suppose if I'm being honest too, part of yesterday was even just our staff meeting on Tuesday and me coming out of it, where we had a really good conversation about, just talking as a team about where we feel people are at, where we're at, and hearing that from a lot of others and thinking, yeah, I can relate to that. Maybe that's something to lean into. So it was kind of a mixture. It actually started a little bit dry for me, a little bit like, this isn't super personal. And then how can I make it personal? How can I make this my, something? And so that's where I kind of went, I guess. And so I don't know. That's why it was a hard question. I wrestled a little bit.
Well, I mean, I kind of alluded to this last week or 2 weeks ago when Robert was asking me some questions about where some of the messages I've been speaking lately have come from. And I think maybe that's why I resonated yesterday so much, because I just sense personally, but also I would say not even just Rise City, but I would say like on a national American scale, there's a spiritual malaise that has set in amongst Christians, and having a hard time putting a finger on exactly what is it. And so yesterday, to talk about these different mountains that surrounded the ultimate mountain of Zion, where the temple is built, and to look at that temple and to look at ultimately Yahweh, the God, to say he's where we're to look to, but all these other mountains filled with temples and all these other things we look to, I couldn't help but just think that there's a part of the spiritual malaise, and you addressed this, was just all the different things that our attention is caught by, we're distracted with, and I don't know. I guess what I'm curious about is, like, I think when I talk about it with people and even our staff, like, people all can resonate with, yes, there is some type of weird spiritual, like I said, malaise, apathy, frustration. Like I take 2 steps forward, I take 10 steps back. I used to be in this rhythm. Now I don't have that rhythm anymore. Like, is what we're experiencing, is this something unique that you feel like that in our lifetime, that this is the first time you've ever seen this, sensed this on such a big scale? Or you're a historian, church historian. Are there other periods of history that you say, this is kind of reminiscent to when this nation or Christians in this country for a long period of time just kind of felt like this floundering?
I think that I'm not, here comes Eeyore. We are what Europe was 100 years ago.
Okay.
And everybody saw that coming. People have been saying that for decades. Like, we're headed towards Europe.
Tell us more about
Europe
that.
was a Christian, Western Europe was Christian. It was Christendom. Everyone was Christian. Everything was Christian. Popes and church leaders had power the way that kings did. And it slowly faded and died and became a secular nation of people who didn't really have interest in church. And now you go over there and you just walk streets of any major European city or even small little European cities, and you find all these big, beautiful church buildings that are basically museums, because people just kind of had enough of it. And in studying church history, like, one of the things that I heard a lot from professors and people who, that was their field in trying to identify the reasons. The most common reason given for the decline of Christianity in Europe was just people being sick of fighting over it. And we've never had a religious war in America. I can't think of a single time anyone's, raised arms to kill another person in America. But that was Europe's story. Obviously, they were killing each other. But I think that the fighting there are a lot of people who go back to the whole stupid, funny Enneagram thing, different wirings, right? For whatever, we're wired different. There are some people who are fueled by fighting. And let's go. I think there are more people in the world who aren't. Who, for the fighting, the vitriol, the anger, like living with anger is
learned
like
helplessness.
I think,
you just kind of
like when you're driving your car and you're pushing on the accelerator and you're revving the car. It's like sometimes you need to rev the car to get it going, but if you stay on those high RPMs, you're going to destroy your engine. It's just right? Eventually you got to take your foot off the accelerator. And when religion and Jesus and Christianity and all this stuff is just this constant, and it really has been now for about 20 or 30 years, feels like. And maybe just COVID and all this stuff accelerated it. And I think people just are tired of in some ways. But I also think, and if you looked at my notes yesterday, I type them out, but then on Sunday morning, you'll always see scribbles, little pen notes. And the part that I had written in pen, and maybe even should have thought it through more, was even Saturday night and then Sunday morning. I really do believe, and I don't always know how to, I know that we're both in this weird position, because if people are engaged in Rise City Church, our jobs are benefited by it.
Yeah.
Right. So for me to stand up and say, you guys should come to church, It's like, well, what else am I going to say? I work here. But at the same time, it's like, how do I communicate? I work here because I really do believe there's a rhythm of involvement. And so I had some notes scribbled in my page, and it came out a little jumbled, I think, at church because it wasn't thought out. But just this idea of like this way that Christians are coming to this place that attending church doesn't matter, and all the reasons for it. And there's a part of me that understands it, but it's also like, we're not even thinking through the way that weekly rhythm is a way that we keep our eyes set on Jesus. And it has been for a long time. And like, I'm not saying you have to go to church, set your eyes on Jesus. I mean, whatever. But I am saying that generally speaking, the people who I see slowly starting to fade off of actually coming and worshiping and are the people who's are probably in their own heart are distancing themselves from a really close, intimate relationship with Jesus. And that's hard to say, but and I know there's people listening, oh, that's not true of me. Okay. But I'm speaking generally, kind of is, because the things that you practice daily and weekly and monthly in your life will bear fruit. And I'm not saying there's some religious power in coming to church, but there is something real about being in this rhythm of constantly reminding myself, which mountain am I looking up to? And that's one of the great things about gathering Christians together and singing and listening to the word preached is it's almost this like, oh yeah, that mountain. Oh yeah, that mountain. And when you stop doing that, when you stop engaging in those kind of practices, yes, there are people who are just so committed to wake up every morning and get in the scriptures and have their own quiet time. And if they don't come to church on Sunday, whatever, but most people, that's not true of. Most people, the Sunday morning is the only time they were ever turning their eyes to Jesus. And now it's like, I go once a month or whatever, I can get there. I don't really need it. Who cares? What's the point? I listen to a sermon online once in a while. It's like how easy it is to start looking to other mountaintops when that's your life.
Yeah.
And that really worries me.
Yeah. Do you feel like, you said these beautiful church buildings in Europe are now museums. Do you feel like that's going to be the story of North America in 100 years?
100 years or 10 years?
10 years? Okay, so you think that's where
it's already the story in big cities.
Yeah.
I mean, I read an article like 3 years ago that freaked me out before COVID. It was talking about how many New York nightclubs are now old churches. Maybe pragmatically, the biggest difference might be a lot of church buildings today would never become museums because they're almost kind of warehouses anyway.
Yeah, they're like Costco buildings.
Yeah,
It's not desirable to go.
I remember I went to the World Cup in 2006 in Germany, and I remember I didn't like soccer. My favorite part of that trip was just seeing these beautiful church buildings. When something is that ornate and that beautiful, you're not just going to tear it down. I think America, as we move forward, will probably just have a lot more churches that what used to be churches are now Amazon warehouses or I don't know, things like that. Housing, tear them down. But I don't think I think we're headed again, the same place that Europe went. And there are still strong evangelical churches that love Jesus throughout Europe, but it's not what it was. So, and most of those churches don't meet in old buildings.
And so a message like yesterday of where do I turn to, where do I fix my gaze and where does my help come from, and trying to encourage people to look back to the Lord in all things. I mean, is that the answer? I mean, because in some ways, like I know we've talked about this, and there's times in my darkest moments, I'm like, I think I'm on a sinking ship, and I'm pretty sure that like my job, I need to find another job because in 15 years, I don't know if we're going to have, in my darkest moments, I looked like that. And if someone's maybe even considering some of these things for the first time, like they're like, wait a minute, did the pastors just say they think the Church of America is like going down and right? Like, so what changes the trajectory of the ship so it doesn't end up like Europe? Is it just simply like what you said yesterday?
I think, we're just talking, right?
Yeah.
You're not asking me because I'm some kind of expert on this. I think that it's not, My most honest answer is I'm probably the wrong person to ask because if you get Robert in here, his wiring is just so much more prone to optimism, seeing, let's go, we can do, and my wiring is like, I'll say this. Number one, I have no fear that it's not like there's nowhere in the world where churches don't exist. Even in the most anti-Christian places in the world, there are churches. And it's not like when you think of Europe, it's not like there's no Christians in Europe. There's tons of Christians here.
Right.
It's just not this monolithic, mega thing that it used to be. And there will always be Christians in America. I think the idea of what we were is maybe what you need to let go of. I also think that trends and just looking at history, what's interesting is, you always see things through your own eyes, and we see it through us living here in North America, and we look at Western Europe. I mean, if you combine Western Europe and the United States together in population, maybe include Canada, I mean, what are you talking about? Like less than an eighth of the world's population?
Yeah.
The greatest strength of Christianity right now is not America. It's South America. It's Africa. It's the burgeoning church in China and Asia. The church isn't dead. I think what's interesting will be to see, and we're already kind of seeing it, but I think we'll see it more. I wouldn't be surprised if 20, 30 years from now, it was very normal to meet a Kenyan missionary.
Coming here to the United States.
Who came to the United States to reach the lost.
Yeah.
And, we send people to Kenya now. There's tons of churches in Kenya. There might be a higher percentage of Christians in Kenya. And I think when that happens, like, cool, welcome, great. Hey, how can we help? I have no doom and gloom about, I'm not like, oh, there's not going to be any churches and there's no reason to be a pastor. Oh, this is the best time to be a pastor. I think we have to, be prepared for what might it look like in a new, I don't know. Will there still be mega churches in 20 years? There might be. maybe that's what ends up happening. There's a small number of huge churches. I don't know. But I'm not, Jesus is still king. I'm not.
Yeah. At the end of the day, right? He said, I'll build my church and the gates of Hades will not prevail against it. So the promise is that the church, the flourishing of the gospel of Jesus Christ in the hearts of the people will continue on. But the medium as we know it, as far as church right now, seems to be less popular and prominent as it once was in this country. And
one thing I said is like, this is something that we have to acknowledge. And it's kind of like, when I think about it in my own heart, my own mind, there's a part of me that's like, I'm kind of angry, but I'm also like, I got to own this. Right now, I genuinely, I can say this 100% truthfully. I really think people need to get back in church. Like it's good.
That was going to be that's a good segue, because I was going to ask about digital online church versus in person. And I'm saying like,
most people know how I stand on that.
I know where you stand on, but that's also the emerging movement of this society is technological, digital based. And so I guess maybe this is a time to like say like, what are some advantages, but also what are some things that people need to actually be aware of and like be like cautious in, and just saying, yep, I'm gonna just embrace fully this whole online expression.
So let me do this. It's a good question. Let me finish my thought because they might be related. What I was saying is, I can honestly, genuinely say, I feel like people need to come back and be a part of this and make this a part of their life. I also have to acknowledge that I, for 23 years, have been a part of a system that has generally said things like that because I wanted a bigger church and more resources and more money. And I wanted to be a part of something big that was famous. Like that's in so many of us, right? Like when I look at myself, as much as I want to deny it, it's in there. I remember being 22, 23, 24, thinking, man, one day we could plant a church. It'll be huge. And our church's name will be on magazine covers and we'll have musicians.
There's so many people right now like, there are magazine covers for churches?
There are. So if this is your world, like whatever world you're in, if you're an accountant, you think about accountants, but like in the church world, if that's what you're called to, like there are pictures of success,
Yep.
which a stockbroker has. What is success for a stockbroker? There are pictures of success for someone who's called to ministry or wants to be in ministry. And those success numbers are always numbers. They're always how many people come to your church. So you're thinking about, how can I do things? How can I be creative? How can I, whatever I got to do to get more people to come to my church? Because the bigger this church gets, the more successful I am. And I want to be successful. And so we have to sit here and acknowledge that for quite a long time now, at least all of my adult life, even when I was in high school and younger, I remember seeing it happen. Especially around here in America and maybe other places, the church has become so obsessed with convincing people to come to our building so we can feel successful. The problem is, it was always good to convince people to come to church because there's something innately good about worshiping God together and learning the scripture. Like, there's something good about that rhythm. So it's true that I do want people to be a part of this and make this part of their weekly normal rhythm of life. But then I also have to acknowledge that a lot of them are kind of checking out because for years they've just seen us as people peddling our own goods for our own betterment. And it's like, whatever, I can watch it on TV. I don't even need it. Do I need any of this? And then I'm like, well, man, have we just shifted and now we're peddling digital church? Because the more subscribers we get to that, then we'll be successful. At what point? Is it like, I don't know. I'm speaking for myself. I'm also speaking for, I guess, all American Christians, Western, whatever. I understand why people they look at church and whatever, because we've kind of done this to ourselves. And I feel that, and I have to acknowledge it in some ways. And there was a season of time that I wasn't working for a church. I was working for a college for 4 or 5 years. And I remember 2, 3, 4 years into it, I remember kind of feeling like, I don't really need to go to church. Whatever. Almost like feeling myself kind of check out a little bit. And now, I'm back on staff. I understand that. And it's like, I want to challenge people to really address that malaise, that thought. Yeah. But then I'm also like, in what ways have I, thanks, Sean.
Look at that.
In what ways have I planted seeds that have caused those thorns to grow up?
Yeah. And I think we constantly are wrestling throughout COVID. It was digital church became this is the wave of the future and everything's got to go completely digital and this accelerate everything. And I think there was parts of it that did. And now there's this you can go to Home Depot and it has a brick and mortar, but it also has online. So you got to kind of have this hybrid approach. But it does seem like as kind of the cultural tides have changed, that the actual ability to be in person with flesh and blood, singing together, hopefully laughing together, maybe crying together, and being there with each other. There's something unique and different about that now than even 2 years ago. And I understand the convenience part of wanting to, hey, if I'm going to be in person this week, great. But then, hey, we're going to travel, and so we can catch it online. And I think that's not going to go away. But there is something even about what you talked about yesterday, where your heart starts to slowly drift, or you slowly start to feel the water rising above you as you take your eyes off Jesus. That there's the digital medium, we have so much stuff that bombards us. And so I don't know if our minds can even differentiate between I'm online right now watching church, but then at the same time I'm looking at fantasy football. At the same time, I'm also checking my email. At the same time, I got a text. And it's we're not having concentrated, focused attention. And I think that is all of a sudden the waters start rising up and we're not fixing our gaze. Yeah. And physically being in a place at least makes you in some way channel your focus for that small period of time, which I think is really helpful right now in this period of time where people are just almost feeling I don't know what happened, but I'm drowning and the water got above my head without me even realizing it.
I was thinking too, I had this thought today. My kids are getting older, years are getting, they're still young, but I'm at a point in life where it's not that hard to get out of the door. Where before, I remember 5 years ago, getting out of the door was just a nightmare.
Yeah. And then mix that with being a pastor, and then you leave that with your wife. So you're hey, you excited about church today, honey? She's like, yeah, when you leave at 6 a.m. and I got to take all 4 kids to church by myself, sounds wonderful.
Yeah. Here's my thing though, and I might turn this a little bit again, I'm thinking about, I try as hard as I can to remember the times in my life when I didn't work for a church, because that's the best I can do to relate to other people. The work to get out of the house, the effort, the get in the car, we're going, take a shower, like, let's go, come in the building, shake people's hands. There's something to it. And I don't want to overstate things. I definitely don't want to say things like, this is the word of the Lord. I'm just talking. But like, when you put some skin in the game, it changes things.
Yeah.
And this just like, I think this is the hardest thing for me. I know you feel this. We're probably just two old guys, you know.
Speak for yourself. I'm still 42.
Saying, like, in the
You're
sense
44.
Of like,
You're an
just
old
like,
man.
You know, a whiny, whatever. I get it. But like, I'm with you. Like, oh, we're traveling this weekend or whatever. Or, hey, we're not feeling well, or we're just going to hang out. We need a break this weekend. We're going to stay home. Whatever. Yeah, of course. Cool. Big deal. I like that we have an online service you can watch. But what I'm really feeling, and I'm feeling, right? I don't need proof of this. I'm just feeling. People just, it's just easier. It's easier to just sleep in, watch it in your pajamas. And I think like there's something, and I know I'm like, we're two guys that like have a vested interest in people, I guess. I mean, yeah, I guess. I don't know that my job is directly impacted by how many show up on a Sunday morning, but generally speaking, but I like, there's something, even those times that I wasn't on staff and I was just going to church, just getting my family up. And it was sometimes, this is kind of a hassle, but you know what? This is a priority in our lives. Like, my kids are going to see from their parents that we value taking whatever it takes to place God at the forefront of our lives. Yeah. And I know, again, we can get whiny about this stuff. And now my kids are getting older and they're playing sports, but you know, your son is you're way worse than us with already Shep and his baseball schedule and stuff. But it's just such a slow fade. He'd be like, well, you know, we got this tournament this week, or they got this thing. And it's like all of these things, you're like, well, I can watch it online. It's like, yes, you can. But you are creating a diet that is eventually going to establish how healthy you are. And I just think a lot of people, because of everything going on, are starting to eat poorly when it comes to their relationship with God and what it means to really place him at the center and do things that show like he is king of my life. He is the primary, most important relationship that I have. I don't want people who have legitimate reasons why they can't come or whatever to feel put off by this statement, because I realize there's always, but generally speaking, the more I see people just kind of be like, I don't know, maybe I'll come, maybe I won't, maybe I'll watch it online. It seems like it's almost a symptom of a bigger issue of like, is Jesus really the most important relationship in your life? Or has that drifted? Have you taken your eyes off him? And what's now following is how you spend your time, how you spend your money, what you do things is slowly starting to fade to other things. And again, I think that we can own some of that and say, have we done a good job? And I don't just mean you and I just mean as Christians, have we done a good job of really helping people see that, like, what does it mean to be a follower of Jesus and commit your life to this? I don't know. And I wrestle with that. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Well, I think going back and to your sentiment of even being a father, like I do think about the next generation. And like when we grew up, there wasn't Sunday competitions with all these other things that were planned. Like there was still built into the fabric of the culture of Sunday being a day of rest, or at least people go to church, but you didn't plan other things. We have not yet seen the fruit of what it looks like when the culture has said that's not the day to rest, and people are torn with, do I choose church or do I choose my kids' sports or whatever it might be, go to the beach? I mean, any of that kind of stuff. And so what does it look like a decade, 2 decades from now when a generation of kids has been raised and they've seen a flexibility of commitment that gets wrapped around?
Or are we seeing the fruit of it?
Well, we are. We are seeing
20 and 30 somethings.
You're probably right. We are part of the fruit. But now it's like, oh my goodness, like what does that look like as it continues to accelerate? And now the digital church has been an option. Like, so it makes it even more convenient that everybody can now say, hey, you know what? We can do all these things and get our church sometime. And I struggle with that because I did, like you said, have vested interest and all that kind of stuff because I'm a pastor and all this. But But I really try to look at it like, how will my kids see the bride of Christ as they grow up, based upon the patterns they've experienced in our household and what example they've seen. And I don't know. I think it's going to be an uphill battle for them, but I want to make sure that they have a foundation. And I think that, like, at this point, granted, my oldest is 12, yours is 2, and you talk about Shep with baseball. Like, I'm thankful this part, that they understand why we say no to things. And I hope that stays, and I hope that they continue that pattern with their kids someday.
I think one balance to this conversation too, and because he's in the back of my head all the time, I want to make sure, like, because if you had no other context, it could just be like you and I sitting here saying coming to church is the most important thing. I love the challenge that Robert brings our staff. I love that Robert challenges us to think it's not all about a weekend service.
Yeah, coming here. Yeah.
And sometimes I think he thinks, I like to argue. Sometimes I think he doesn't. Maybe he's like, Pete, do you even agree with me? It's like, of course I agree with you. I absolutely believe that a healthy diet of being a committed follower of Jesus is much more than coming to church on Sunday. And one of the most impactful things we can be doing for our kids isn't just bringing them to church, but it's serving with them. It's, I'm excited this weekend to go build a house in Mexico with my kids and your kids. And the way that Robert is challenging us to be like, we also need to be serving. And I think in no way do I want to have anyone listening to this podcast think that I've like, well, forget about that. You just need to come to church, because a lot of kids grow up in homes that coming to church on Sunday morning is it.
Yeah.
And that empty form of Christianity is nothing worth hanging on to, and they quickly abandon it. Whereas kids that grow up in families, that it's more than just coming on Sunday. It's all the fruit that comes from all the other things, the involvements, the serving opportunities, the giving, the engagement throughout the week and throughout the year. It's more than just showing up on Sunday. I think what is maybe what we're really focusing in right now, though, is in some ways that Sunday morning is sort of maybe the first step for a lot of people, the easiest, most basic. And when you're losing that, the problem is so many of these other things are following it.
Yeah.
It's not just that people aren't coming on Sunday. It's that they're not quite as involved in life groups. They're not giving as much. They're not going on service projects. When we have, like, it's almost the whole thing can be a little bit connected. And I just wanted some balance there as well.
Yeah. So I want to finish this episode a little different, because I had a feeling that the heaviness would be a part of the front end. I was like, you know what, we gotta not just end this thing with just like doldrums. Thanksgiving's Thursday, and gratitude is a great way, I feel like, at times to get perspective and lift the spirit. But also, as people, the primary people who watch this are Rise City Church, people who come to Rise City. And I don't want at times for them to misinterpret us either, to be like, oh my gosh, like our pastors think this, and this, or this about us. I am super grateful for the church we pastor.
Yeah.
And I just thought it'd be fun for just the last part of this episode, like as we get ready to have Thanksgiving and gratitude, like I also, to bring balance to even what we've been talking about, just to spend a couple minutes, what are we thankful for with Rise City? And if it's people's names that come up, if it's different things in the church, but like, John, you're behind the camera if you want to shout something out, but like, seriously, like I was just like, I also want to, like, there's these moments that you're like, oh, I feel this heaviness of spirit, but at the same time, when I take a step back, I'm like, but a lot of these things I even feel that are right in front of me aren't indicative of the majority of those in this church. Like, this is a flipping fantastic church and great people. And so I just wanted to, like, hopefully people are still listening, watching, like, what are you thankful for? Who are you thankful for with Rise City? And John, like I said, jump in and let's just finish that way.
Yeah, I'm with you. Sorry, just real quick. Like, it is true that maybe one thing that people might struggle with to understand, where sometimes you and maybe I'm coming from, is we're in a field like that sees the whole field. Yeah. Like, so when we talk about church, we're not just talking about Rise City. We're seeing like what's happening in America and Canada and Europe. And oftentimes there is a part of me that almost feels kind of guilty because I hear horror stories and I'm like, I don't know, Rise is a great place. Some people have moved and left the state and things, but we have a great church. I feel very confident in our church and love being a part of it. I think I don't know, people at Rise, take ownership and get involved. And like, I don't know. I think I would have quit a long time ago if being a pastor just meant well, you're the pastor, so do everything. And I love being a part of a community of people that, there's this guy, Jeff Mueller on our security team. He does a ton of stuff. Like, Jeff's always sending me emails about new ideas to help the church do things better. Like, he sent me one yesterday. He's like, hey, can I get a floor plan? I'm trying to think of ways I can, and it's just like, he's not getting paid. Yeah. There's no salary there. And he's just one of so many people that, are seeing this community as the people of God and wanting to give his time and his life to it. And with Jeff, I know he's got so much stuff going on in his own personal life that he's dealing with, and he's choosing to. And so he's a name that popped into my head of just somebody that's like, it's just cool to see. And he's not alone. There's so many people like him. Yeah. And we did this sledding event the other night, and, I helped set up with you. You and I helped it set up.
Yeah, my back felt it.
Like, man, when we got done and the snow was done, I spent like 2 or 3 minutes kind of showing the first set of volunteers, and then I didn't do a thing until 8:30.
Yeah,
did nothing. I mean, nothing. Walked around, kind of hang out, talked to people, did nothing. And we just had all these people who were just like, yeah, I'll serve. And afterwards, people just stayed and were throwing hay bales back on trucks. And Chris McCauley's like, I'll take the wood back to my house. And I was just like, oh, thank you. Seeing people who view this not as something, it's not our thing, it's their thing, and they're a part of it. And that makes me thankful. And even, I know it's awkward and it's weird. I'm just amazed at how generous people are here financially. You kind of keep waiting for the bottom to fall out. Is this the day people are going to stop being generous financially? I was like, nope. And that's so encouraging, because when people give financially, it helps pay the bills and things, but it speaks something. It says that, okay, you're in this with me. I don't know how to explain that. It's like, these people, like, we're in this together. And seeing people's generosity, both in their time and their money, is just, it's cool. It's a great thing to be a part of.
Yeah. Jean?
Yeah. I'm gonna come in.
Come on in, Jean. Come on in.
I have 2 people I think of and one thing. Nathaniel Pitcher. I know you listen.
Who's super skinny
Nathaniel.
now.
Yeah.
Like 75 pounds.
But along the same lines, he has just donated his time, his resources, his knowledge, just to embed the experience, if you will. You know what I mean? But like, oh, this system makes more sense, or this cable makes more sense, or this, and coming into my role and immediately kind of having him come up to me and just kind of offer some suggestions. And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, I'm leaning on you for a lot. And then also, like, former employee, but has kept around, is Lee Sherman.
Yeah.
And he has been
former employee, just for clarity, not because he was let go.
He left.
He had another job.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes. Yeah. And he has not withheld a single secret that would put him in a better position to maybe get hired again or anything like that. All of his knowledge he's given to me, which has been super grateful. And then the people in this church, and I think it comes from the leadership of this church, lead with grace, and that has transformed my life, and I've seen it transform other people's lives. That they were expecting one thing to happen, they're expecting judgment, or they're expecting discipline, and instead they received grace and like, all right, let's do this together.
Yeah.
And that transformation is way more impactful than just judging someone or disciplining someone to change.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm grateful for.
That's awesome. Yeah. I would say all those things you just said, those people, I think of, you mentioned people that just give so much. I think of like Janelle Maligue, the women's ministry. I think of your wife leading mother's ministry. And I think of, Jim Nichols and Michael Lee Wright and the whole men's team. I'm thankful that I don't really understand it, but I've been getting these prayer requests from this Knights Round Table. And I think there's men in our church that act like they were who's that, King Arthur? Who had the Knights of Templar or whatever? Is that King?
My favorite is that how some of them don't realize when they send the email, it comes from their person.
Yeah. There's been a couple of those.
That's great.
But either way, but there are guys that have kind of taken on this anonymous identity to say that we're here though for you. And weekly, a couple times a week, I get prayer requests or not, what would I pray for you about? I think of like Michael Magera and Sarah and just the way that they went down to Mexico. And, I think of Brian Fordyce and all the people who've been going down on all those trips. And anytime you come into like our foyer area, it doesn't matter if it's a high attended day or a low attended day. Like there's a vibrancy, there's a buoyancy. Every new person I ever interact with and I send emails to, generally when they come back and say, hey, what stuck out to you? They're like, man, so-and-so came and said hi, or someone, I felt so welcomed at your church. The 150 plus people that serve in our kids ministry every week. I think of Ashley Pedroza and Ralph Goodrich, who have to be outside when it's 98 degrees, with the kids of volunteers. And there's just so many awesome people. I think of guys like Kurt LaJoy, who, man, he can cook with the best of them, but he's so excited to do that. Or Susie Suarez, who's been doing that. I just keep saying names and names. And I would say, I'm thankful for this church, because if the expression of the church in our lifetime changes drastically, what I've experienced here at Rise City, and God willing will continue to experience, I do believe this is church. And I do believe that there are people embodying the ways of Jesus. And I do believe that we're choosing to ultimately fight the good fight, even though it's a fight and it's hard. And even with all the people who have left, to see how many people still are here and engaged. Sure, is it frustrating that some people checked out or people online? Yeah, but like overarching majority, I just really thank you, Rise City Church, because seriously, like it's an incredible place. And I love so many people. And I don't know, just this Thanksgiving, we are very grateful and thankful for all of you. So,
yeah, it's good.
Yeah. Gratitude changes pessimism really quickly. So, anyway, that's how we'll conclude episode 42 at the 42nd minute mark. I mean, there you go.
That was planned. It's a sign from Jesus.
It's a sign from Jesus. So,
I don't know what it's a sign of.
This coming Sunday, we're launching a new series for the next 4 weeks, whatever it is. Advent, just kind of anticipating the coming Savior. And Robert will be kicking off that series, as Pete and I are actually going to be down in Mexico with the Mexico Home Build. But man, excited to have Robert kick off that series. So he'll be on Digging Deeper next week with somebody, probably maybe John or I don't know, whoever. And
It'll be good.
Yeah, just have an awesome Thanksgiving. We're super grateful for you. Thanks for watching and listening. And let's keep moving forward together.
All right. See you guys.
See you.